Thanks, Harold. Harold's put us on a very tight schedule. We're running behind time, so we'll make it as informative as possible, but also as truncated as possible to get us back on schedule. We've got a great panel of people up here, and what I'll do is I'll ask them to introduce themselves briefly, and then we'll go to the questions. So just a minute or so to say who they are. So Jeff, could you just inform the...
Yeah, Jeff Murray. I'm a sheep and wheat producer in the wheat belt in Western Australia. We mainly do export sheep, and one time we did cattle, but the grass doesn't seem to grow as much now as it used to.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. Kat Giles.
So, Kat Giles, I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Sheep Producers Australia, which is formerly Sheepmeat Council, veterinarian and used to be a producer in South Australia, did my veterinary studies and then been with Sheepmeat Council over in Canberra for the last 7 years.
David Beatty.
Thanks, Kat. David Beatty, also a veterinarian with a research background. I've been with Meat and Livestock Australia for 9 years, and most recently for the last 5 years based in the Middle East, firstly as the Livestock Services Manager and more recently as the International Business Manager there.
David Kerr.
David Kerr. I came to Australia in 1981 as a feedlot manager for Wellard Rural Exports. In 1984, I became the livestock manager until 2008. In 2009, I've been a consultant for working with the LEP in the Middle East until present.
Thank you. First question to you, Jeff. Mate, you've toured the Middle East many a time in your role on the Sheepmeat Council and as president. Can you just tell us what the highlights have been, the impacts that you've seen, and particularly from the time you went to your recent tour now?
I think, David, for me, the biggest thing was to see the improvement in the facilities, both for slaughter of livestock and the feedlot facilities. 10 years ago, there were quite a lot that were pretty ordinary at best, and to go back recently and see the huge improvement that in those feedlots and slaughter facilities. And for me, the big take-home point was the fact that the local livestock were being put through the same facilities. So we've lifted the bar on livestock welfare right across the board, not only the Australian livestock.
You know, I think that's an important point, and if you look at Jeff, in Qatar, 1.8 million non-Australian sheep are put through those same facilities, so that increase is dramatic over the years.
Yes.
Kat, as a veterinarian and an animal nutritionist, what did you observe and what did you think on your tour just recently, and when you saw the animals going through the supply chain from your background?
Yeah, thanks, David. It was an absolutely fascinating trip from my perspective. As I said, I've been with Sheepmeat Council nearly 7 years, and to actually have the opportunity to experience it firsthand, to see the facilities firsthand, was phenomenal, and I thank MLA for the support for us to be able to do that. I guess the key things from my perspective, we're seeing, the facilities and the health of the animals, the access to clean, fresh, cooled water in many instances, as obviously it is quite hot over there, and particularly when we were there. The fans, they had misters in the pens. There was a lot of work done to try and reduce the heat stress on the animals. We didn't see any animals in extreme distress from the heat, but you could obviously see that the heat was there, and there's been quite a lot of research going into that space. But there was the occasional issue with dust in the eyes or things, minor things. But overall, I was extremely impressed with the feedlotting facilities, and then through the supply chain and into the abattoirs and the processing facilities. Again, the compliance with the SCAS requirements was just an outstanding opportunity to see that and to see how the whole supply chain operates.
No, thanks for that, Kat. David, you've spent 5 years of your life in the Middle East. You've just recently ended in the Middle East, so you have the most comprehensive thoughts and insights into when you first got there, in the middle and at the end. How do you see the changes for the people, the workers, and most importantly, the animals over that time?
I think, yeah, so in the period I was there was obviously quite interesting and challenging with the implementation of SCAS. And I think just reflecting on it, one of the things that became clear over that 5-year period was that in the end, anyone going into a facility, whether that's a feedlot or an abattoir, there was an instant recognition of Australia with animal welfare. So I think for me that was one of the things that I noticed over that 5-year period. I guess the second thing, talking about change and everlasting change, and from an animal welfare perspective, was the Eid al-Adha, which is the festival of the sacrifice, where previously MLA and LiveCorp through the LEP were investing in supporting exporters and importers during that period, getting livestock selected appropriately and slaughtered appropriately in facilities. Over the last 5 years, there's been, much to my surprise, a shift towards people, instead of selecting a live animal, were happy to buy a ticket and actually receive a carcass, which if someone had have asked me that 5 or 6 years ago, you know, you would have got laughed down. So the fact that that's happening in Kuwait and Oman and the UAE and Qatar, it has been happening for a number of years. The fact that that's happening is, I think, a really good step in the right direction. And I guess the third thing as far as change goes, and Wayne Collier mentioned it briefly in his presentation, is the fact that we have seen volumes reduce. You've mentioned it, there's a lot of other sheep coming from other parts of the world. So that competitiveness is there. Yeah, we see sheep from Portugal in Israel, you know, there's Romanian sheep in Jordan, sheep from Spain and Georgia floating in, and you've still got India and obviously African sheep by the millions coming into that part of the world. So I think that has changed, and obviously our live export volumes have dropped off, but we've seen an increase in chilled and frozen carcass trade in particular.
Yeah, no, thank you. And David, with your vast experience over there, working in the LEAP program, also working for exporters directly, and your experience elsewhere in the feedlot sector, what are the changes and improvements that you've seen, and any things that you think can be further improved as we go on in this journey?
Yeah, well, what I'd like to talk about is the transition to the SCAS implementation. I was actually in Kuwait when the farmer review turned up in town, and what came about from that was huge changes. We as consultants had to go out there and do gap analysis, which means we did reports to the exporter. Prior to, because of SCAS, you had to have an international auditor inspecting your facility, and 3 times a year. That was so. We went around and made sure that everything was right prior to the auditor being given the okay to inspect the facility, to make sure that when they did come, everything was in place. We have done we have made a lot of infrastructural improvements in that time as well, putting in V-belts and unloading facilities for sheep and cattle and restraining everything to improve the movement of animals, to as Kev said earlier, to reduce the stress and to make them happier. So that's basically what we've been up to.
No, thanks for that. I think just a general question for you all. How do you see the markets developing? How do you see the future of the sheep trade to the Middle East? And I know that we've all been involved in what we just say is continuous improvement. We want to see next year being better than the year before, etc. So just your views generally. Jeff, you can take it away, I think, mate.
Yes, well, I guess the improvements that have been brought up to date have been really good. I think as to the future, I think there's probably the fact that there's more and more chilled product going in there is certainly going to impact on the number of live sheep probably out of Australia. Whether that impacts on the other sheep from around the world as much, I doubt, but I'm sure the high quality product that comes out of the Australian feedlot system in through the Middle East, the young merino wethers and stuff that we saw hanging on the hook were absolutely magic. The first class product, and they certainly love our high quality product that we present there for them.
Okay.
Good future for the industry, I'd believe.
And it's interesting to note that sheep numbers remain steady this year. They didn't decline, and there's other market opportunities, whether it's Iran coming on, Saudi, etc. So I don't think we can be too pessimistic on the numbers of live sheep going there. So
no, and I think as the wool industry has lifted so much, there'll be certainly a return to those wethers that previously were slaughtered very young with a lot more of those wethers coming through and being available for the export trade.
No, good point. Kat?
Yeah, look, I think one of the biggest challenges that we've got as an industry is the supply, and we know that the sheep flock has fallen numbers-wise over the years, and the number of markets that are now available to us through live export but also through chilled product means there's a huge amount of competition, and we understand that then puts pressure on the markets. I think that there is definitely still the opportunity to build the live export market over there as well as into other countries, but the competition is going to continue to be strong, and as Jeff just said, with the wool prices increasing, we're going to see more wanting to hold on to those wether lambs a little longer, maybe to get another wool clip off them before they send them off. So that could be a positive for us.
Good. David?
Yeah, I agree. Competitiveness is going to be crucial, and supply. It's market specific, so you have to think of what's going to happen with Iran and Saudi, and if those markets markets open, or we get the commercial facilitation right and government facilitation right, then they could be good live export markets. And I think it is market specific as well. I mean, you've seen UAE try and get more dynamic in importing different lines of livestock, and they've had some quite good growth there, and Oman as well to a certain degree. So it is market specific, and I guess the third thing is really depends on subsidies. Qatar in particular is still a subsidised market. I think if they remove that subsidy, then that would be a negative on the trade.
Good point, David.
Yeah, what I've seen in recent times is, as mentioned, the flock has reduced, and therefore there's more and more younger animals going into these markets. The price has increased, so the average weight of the animals has gone down remarkably, and we have to compete against other countries, and we need to lift our weight or reduce our price, and the best scenario for us is to lift our weight so we can remain competitive per kilo of meat. Huh?
Yeah, no, exactly. Thank you, David. We're short of time, so I think I'll say we've got 2 questions from the audience. Anybody putting their hand up for a question? I won't call it too many times.
There's one over there.
One there, thank you.
Just while that's happening, I think it'd be remiss of us not to mention the fact that the high esteem which David Beatty was held in the Middle East by all of the industry. We were fortunate enough to go around with David in his last term tour around the area, and everywhere we went, he was held in such high esteem, and I think it's a credit to him, but it's a credit to our industry as a whole that he was so well respected and looked up to in our industry. Thanks.
Here. Well done, David. Heather?
Hi, Heather Neal from the RSPCA. Almost all sheep in the Middle East are still killed while they're fully conscious, which is obviously a very significant welfare risk. Where is progress going with stunning in the Middle East? And what's the Australian industry doing to actually take it from the low number that it is now to 100% in a very short period of time? We've been waiting and waiting and waiting for change.
Well, thanks, Heather. I think the best person to answer that is David, as he's run stunning trials and has been pushing that in his tenure. And of course, we have to acknowledge that Jordan has basically stunned sheep nearly totally across the big supply chains there. But David?
I think while stunning is while non-stun slaughter remains in the OIE as acceptable by the OIE, it's difficult to shift a lot of that culture, and the Islamic faith is very strong, and having Western people I've found it very difficult anyway, being a Western person and not from that faith, being able to argue for stunning has been incredibly difficult. But it's not something that we don't do and will continue to do, and obviously Jordan is one of those places that do stun, and it's something that we'll keep continuing to try and push, but it has been remarkably difficult, and while it's allowable under the OIE, it's hard to shift.
Thanks for that. A further question? No, well, thanks. Question at the front, just got in.
There must be other areas where you think there's room for improvement over there. It can't all be all good, as we've heard. What do you tell me? I mean, are there areas where there needs to be improvement, either in welfare, handling, or otherwise?
You can hear that?
Yeah, look, I mean, I'm happy to. I mean, absolutely, agree with you 100%. It's in fact, I was just saying to my colleagues before we came on, it's, let's not put too much of a positive spin on it, because there are areas that you can do more work. Obviously we recognise it's very hot over there, so during those really hot months, there's work to be done in that heat period where work's required. And I think it's a continual, as been happening for years, it's just continually pushing. And you see it's utilising, I think the Middle Eastern people as a rule are generally quite competitive, even within countries and between countries. So you can utilise that. We see in the UAE and Dubai, the government there is using SCAS as a benchmark and then trying to go beyond that. So you take that competitiveness then down to Abu Dhabi and then into Kuwait and into Qatar, and if you can say that these people are doing something different in the country next door, you can use that to continually improve their, not just facilities, but also the way they handle animals. So, I mean, we acknowledge there's vast differences between particularly feedlots particularly abattoirs within the region. So some look quite new and sophisticated, others are fairly basic. So getting that government investment, I think, their government investment into abattoirs is another area that we can continually push on.
No, thank you. And I think that will finish us for the day. I was over there in the current Eid, and I was in Kuwait. One of the things that I saw that was a positive, and you might seem to think this is a small issue, where there was a mishandling of a sheep, an Australian sheep, about to occur under OIE, and the people didn't know that we were there, but a Bangladeshi slaughterman intervened and put that sheep through the Australian supply chain, and from my perspective, that was good, because it has got into people's minds and work culture that Australian sheep are to be treated differently than other sheep. So that was positive to see. While it was a small thing, it was a big thing, because all that training, all that effort has gelled in that person. Okay, thank you for having us, and continue on.